Yo, what's up, boys and girls? It's SwoleTrain, and I'm back at again with a video. This time, it's a little different. Today, like me, you guys might have a Salamangreat problem. Personally, I like the deck a lot. I really enjoy playing it, and in fact, it's probably one of my favorite budget options for a deck that we've gotten in a very long time. Yes, Sunlight Wolf does not come inside of the structure deck for the Salamangreats, but outside of that, maybe a few other cards like the Violet Chimera, a few hand traps, and maybe some back row, you can make a pretty good competitive deck for roughly 30 to 60 bucks, which is actually pretty good. But today we're not going to talk about how good Salamangreats are. We're not going to talk about are Salamangreats actually fine. We're also not going to take a deep dive into a meta discussion about Salamangreats quite yet. Instead, we're actually going to be talking about Salamangreats and how to beat Salamangreats. Somewhere out there beneath the pale moonlight, you guys will be facing off against Salamangreats left and right. Whether it be at your locals, your regionals, YCS, UDS, this deck is everywhere. If you guys have watched videos on this or have seen the representation of Salamangreats inside of YCS Dusseldorf, you guys can clearly see that it is a deck that is going to stay. And I have to admit before we get this video started, this is not an entirely original video. I recently watched Dzeeff's 5 cards you could use against Salamangreats, or something along that title. I can't necessarily remember the exact thing. But essentially, Dzeeff goes through 5 different cards that you can put inside of your deck, whether it be Salamangreats or relatively more generic cards that you can use in other strategies to help you in aiding you against the Salamangreat menace. And where I think that video was great, where I think you guys should watch that video before watching mine, links in the description. But in this video, I want to extend upon those ideas and talk about 5 more cards, potentially 5 other cards that you guys could use against Salamangreats. This also might encompass card categories in itself, not necessarily just these 5 cards that I'm going to talk about, but they are also really super tech choices. If you guys want to count how many times I say Salamangreat inside this video, I would love to know. These cards might not be the most optimal, they may not be able to fit inside of every single deck, but without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Salamangreat, all of the ways you guys can beat Salamangreat with these cards. This video will actually be split into 2 separate segments. In the first half, I'm going to be talking about cards that you can use going first, and the second half, I'm going to talk about cards that obviously you can use going second. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break down these cards. And the first thing I want to talk about are field spells. And today I want to talk about a few field spells you guys can use against Salamangreat. So the first one I want to talk about is, of course, Necro Valley. Necro Valley is almost a hard counter to most decks that really prominently feed off the graveyard. This is only a card that you can really use going first because obviously, if you're going second and you activate this card, they've already done their combos, they've already done their plays, and you can't really capitalize off that. The cool thing about Necro Valley is you don't necessarily have to play it inside of Gravekeepers to make it effective. Yes, it does have the 500 attack and defense boost for all Gravekeeper monsters, but Necro Valley allows you to negate the movement, so to speak, and the activation of effects inside of graveyards. So they can't banish cards, they can't move them from the graveyard to the field, and they can't put them back into the deck, back in their hand, yada yada yada. All the key combo players and all the key combo cards inside of Salamangreat do this, but that's not a really good descriptor, is it? Essentially, your key cards for the deck are Spinny, Jack Jaguar, Falco, and even some of the trap cards that set themselves onto the field. Banelinks, in addition to that, can banish itself from the grave to protect all your monsters. Regardless of that, Necro Valley is a pretty clear-cut way to take care of a lot of these threats that are moving in and out of the grave back onto the field. Cards like Spinny, Jack Jaguar, and Falco. That being said, they do have forms of spot removal with cards like Twin Twisters at their disposal, and of course the archetype trap card, Salamangreat Rage. Now there's a second field spell I want to highlight, and this is kind of where the multiple cards, but essentially 5 similar types of the same cards come into play. We have something that is actually incredibly niche, and that is Fire Prison. The reason why I say it's a niche tech choice inside of Cyberus decks is because it really limits not only your opponent, but in a lot of ways you. So it's not necessarily the most optimal card, but it can get the job done. It also adds another layer of protection around your Cyberus monsters. Things like Widow Anchor and Mind Control are easily dealt with its second card effect, being that they can't target your monsters. In addition, that is an extra layer of protection on top of that. Now that being said, this card is only effective if you have an established board already, but if you're doing in the mirror match, especially with Salamangreats, it can be pretty good, question mark. That being said, is it more effective than Necro Valley? It's a little more limiting than Necro Valley and is definitely more niche, but it is something to consider, it is something to think about. The next card we're going to talk about is actually a trap card that I think is probably the most effective out of any of the cards that I've talked about going first yet. First things first, let's talk about Gozen Match and Rivalry of the Warlords. Now, I've talked about these cards at length before inside of my Cyber Dragon side deck options, but today I'm going to talk about them because Salamangreats, in some lists at least that I've seen, have been main decking and even side decking these cards. And that makes complete and total sense. Gozen Match and even Rivalry of the Warlords aren't necessarily effective against this deck, as you can control essentially all your monsters that are fire and cybers. Outside of maybe the Nightmare Phoenix, which is a fiend card, most of the monsters that you're going to be summoning inside of Salamangreats are monotype and attribute. So Goes and Match and Rivalry of the Warlords won't really do the trick like they would for possibly other decks inside the meta. However, one card that is actually pretty good against a lot of other strategies that can be played in a lot of different decks is actually There Can Only Be One. This card for a while was more of the budget option of Goes and Match and Rivalry, as it wasn't necessarily effective against certain decks. Like I said previously, these cards aren't necessarily for everything, but There Can Only Be One is actually relatively effective when it comes to things like Sky Strikers, Thunder Dragons, and even Salamangreats. There Can Only Be One is an infinite trap card that states you can only control one monster of each type. And like we said previously, because Salamangreats are a monotype and attribute deck, but going first and especially starting off with this card is a very good power play and can probably net you some wins against Salamangreats going first. Now, of course, there are other cards you can use going first, things like Summon Limit, maybe Torrential Tribute, just if you're going old school. So play around with it, see what works best for you guys, and let me know what you guys find going first. But going second, let's talk about a few cards. And the shortest one that I have to talk about is, of course, our boy Gamma Seal and the entirety of the Kaiju engine. The ability to tribute over your opponent's Cyberus Link monster is actually the key here. If you guys do not know, Salamangreat Roar states that you have to control a Link monster and able to activate its effect. So turning off that instant negation, which is usually one of the only interruptions / negations that the deck can consistently put out, and that's pretty much all I can say about it. The Gamma Seals and the Kaijus are effective, yes, but it's also more of a scenario by scenario basis. It's not going to win you every single game, but it is a fast, effective way to get rid of your opponent's Link monster and also shutting off that negation inside of Roar. And the next two cards I want to talk about are actually inside of the hand trap category. Soulmeister was recently released as a Code of the Duelist special edition promo. You guys might already have a few copies of this laying around the house somewhere. Similar to cards like DD Crow, Ghost Spell, and even somewhat Called by the Grave if you're, let's say, going first, this card kind of acts as a one-time Abyss Dweller. If an effect is activated inside your opponent's graveyard, then you can quick effect send this card to the graveyard and then negate the effect. It is a one-time use similar to DD Crow, similar to Ghost Spell, but it is a nice budget option that allows you to negate just that one time. Now, it is no Call by the Grave where it extends that negation for longer. Salamangreats do have a lot of recurring value and can also extend the play further. It would just take a little more resources. But in the times where they can't, and in the times when they might actually need those resources to make a full board or a better board, Skullmeister and cards like it that negate cards in the graveyard, even let's say DD Crow that banishes it from the graveyard, are pretty helpful inside of the matchup. Again, it's not an end-all be-all, and this card, similar to Fire Prison and even Necro Valley, isn't going to win you the game outright, but it is a good option against the deck nonetheless. Starting off cards like Spinny, even Salamangreat Roar, and other effects that activate into the graveyard, which of course Salamangreats do in spades. And the last card that I want to talk about is actually my boy, Contact C. If you guys do not know, Contact C is a pretty nutty card. This thing is such a niche tech choice. I'm always super excited to see it inside a deck list. If I see it inside a replay, if I'm watching a live duel feature match and I see it being used, I'm hyped. Contact C is super dumb. It's really not even that good of a card. It's obviously no Max C or the other Cs. Being released inside of Extreme Force and reprinted inside the Megatons, Contact C is a cheap and effective way to, let's say, slow down your opponent, if not, stop them outright. Contact C allows you to special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's side of the field if they normal or special summon a monster. And then they must use Contact C as material for something, whether it be links, XYZs, fusion. Maybe that's what the C stands for, is cock block. This thing is a cock block of a card. If your opponent slaps down a normal summon, a Gazelle, Spinny, Foxy, nah. But they will have to waste more resources and gain that extension of play, and in some scenarios, they might just end their turn, pass on to you, and then you can see what you can do. Contact C isn't necessarily even the strongest monster, and it's not like a kaiju where it gets rid of something, but if your opponent cannot get rid of it, it can really be a nuisance and a bug, a pest, if you will, on their field. It's probably my favorite card out of this list, and again, similar to the other ones, it's not for everyone, but I'm down. But that is going to end my list of 5+ cards that I think are going to be good against Salamangreats. Now, a lot of these cards are budget options, and I did want to focus more on that. But like I said, if you guys are looking for more generic, possibly a better list of cards against Salamangreats, you check out Dzeeff's videos, and his video in particular on 5 cards that you can use against Salamangreats. Whether I or he have the secret sauce, I wish you best of luck on your matches against Salamangreats, and if you are playing Salamangreats, well, maybe you want to take some notes on mine and Dzeeff's video just to kind of get an idea of what people might be playing against you to counter your deck. But without further ado, that's all I have to say about this. I'll pass the question on to you. What do you guys think of it? What do you guys think of Salamangreats? What do you guys think of the tech choices that I presented? If you guys watched Dzeeff's video, what did you guys think? What other tech choices do you guys have that you guys think are really, really good or really, really bad against Cyberus? bad. I don't know why I asked for bad recommendations for this, whatever. Anyways, let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys like this video, make sure to leave a like if you want some more. Please subscribe to more videos coming in the pipeline, so stay tuned for that if you want to. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.